What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
The author of the sensational international bestseller and the most compelling non-fiction publication of all time is back in London for the first time in 25 years to celebrate Chariots of the Gods' 50th anniversary. Eric Von Däniken Legacy Night. In this 2-hour special, you are invited to share with Eric his most influential discoveries and revelations. Learn about his incredible life journey as an author and researcher. Meet the team behind the highly anticipated Chariots of the Gods 360-degree entertainment franchise. Eric Von Däniken Legacy Night, live streamed from the Princess Anne Theatre, BAFTA 195, Piccadilly, London, October 15th, 2016.
The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online, you're now watching the UK's only alternative late-night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Dr. Michael Salia. Now, Dr. Michael Salia is a pioneer in the development of exopolitics, which is the study of extraterrestrial life and its political implications. Now, he is the author of 5 books, including his most recent book, which is an Amazon #1 bestseller, Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances. And Michael Salia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Glad to be here.
I am very glad to have you on, especially all the way from Hawaii.
Yes, it's a great place to be doing what I do now, which is exopolitics, to have this kind of beautiful natural environment to balance the kind of dark conspiracy stuff that I need to sort through in understanding what's really going on.
Absolutely. I mean, it is an amazing place. I can see a bit of Hawaii just behind you there. It looks so beautiful.
Yes, that's lava you can see, and ocean in the background there, and that lava. Only 30 years ago, it was red hot and flowing.
Wow. Oh, I've got to come to Hawaii one day, most definitely. How long have you lived in Hawaii then? We can get the words out.
I've been living here since 2004, and prior to that, I spent 8 years in Washington, D.C., And before that, I was in Australia, where I was born and raised.
Right. Okay. Yes, because yep. So when you retired, you moved to Hawaii. Then it must have been.
Well, it wasn't so much that I was retired. I was basically sacked from the university because I started to do research into this new field of exopolitics, and my university peers, superiors, just did not approve. And basically, it got to the point where when the Washington Post ran a feature story on my research into President Eisenhower having a meeting with extraterrestrial ambassadors back in 1954, that was got front page spot in the Post in the style section. So the university then decided that they wanted to cut their association with me. They did not support it, and they just didn't want in any way to be associated with this exopolitics.
Oh my gosh. What was that? A massive, do you feel that was a massive blow at the time? When you look back now, was it the best thing that ever happened to you?
Yeah, pretty much so. It really was a pretty massive at the time, because I was living and working in the US, and I had a visa from the university, American University, Washington, D.C., and my son was living with me at the time as well. So because the university decided to cut its association with me, it meant that I literally had to leave the country, as did my son. And so, I mean, he'd been here for 8 years, going through primary school, and so all of a sudden I had to kind of ship him back to New Zealand to be with his mother, and I had to basically leave the country. And as it turned out, on my route, literally, as I was preparing and planning about moving back to Australia, I ended up in Hawaii and met my future wife, and I've been here ever since.
Right, so a bit of destiny playing in there as well, most definitely. Now, it must have been so important for you to continue this work. What was the spark for you? What really got you into exopolitics? Now, and just briefly, we've touched on in the intro what exopolitics means, but if you want to go a bit more into detail, please, you're welcome.
Sure. Well, but for me, up until May of 2001, I was pretty much a conventional scholar in international politics. I had full-time positions at a number of universities, at the Australian National University in Canberra, Australia, and then I had a full-time position as an assistant professor at American University in Washington, D.C. And then in May of 2001, I saw Steven Greer's Disclosure Project press conference. And I have to say, it really changed my life. It blew me away, because I thought, well, if only half of what these people are saying is true, that changes completely what is really happening around us. That what I've been teaching, what I thought I understood about the nature of international politics was completely different. It had this much deeper level to it. And people kind of give all sorts of names to this kind of deep level politics that is happening behind the scenes. And I came up with the term exopolitics. I wasn't the first one to use the term, but back in 2003, when I started to publish in this field, I called it exopolitics, because that to me kind of represented politics that was dealing with this question of extraterrestrial life, and what are the implications if there are indeed extraterrestrials visiting our world, secretly interacting with our government agencies, military departments, with agreements and with abductions and contacts with private citizens. So that was really how I approached this new field of exopolitics.
Incredible. And the journey's taken you, you've gone all over the world with this, haven't you?
I've travelled quite a few places, but the United States is where I'm mainly focused, because this is where a lot of the action is, at least in terms of the major technology projects, the major funding, the major players. It is really US based. The other countries do play important supporting roles. I mean, Great Britain, Australia, Canada, the Five Eyes nations are part of this kind of US network. And then you have other countries like Russia, or China or India having their own kind of separate programs, but definitely the United States is the one that's gone furthest down the track in terms of being able to fully understand the depth of these kinds of extraterrestrial technologies and what's needed to be able to prepare humanity for that day when this is disclosed to the world.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned Dr. Steven Greer as well. He is someone that I'm trying very, very hard right now to get on. He's very busy. He's very active. He is in what he's doing right now. He's done some great documentaries, I can see how he would have drawn you in, drawn you into this sort of field and the sort of life work that you've carried on with doing now. Have you met Dr. Steven Greer?
I have actually. That was one of the things that soon after I saw the Disclosure Project press conference, I was able to meet with Steven Greer and actually arranged to have him do a speech at American University, because I was at the time I was a research associate with the Center for Global Peace at the university. But what happened was that once the university realized, or my employer, once they realized just how much I wanted to explore this field, they really put an end to that, so I had to cancel that. But yes, definitely I did meet with Steven Greer, made an initial effort to try and have him speak at American University, but then was prevented from doing so by my superiors.
Yeah, it's just incredible, isn't it? Just how controlled this is, in a sense. People are just in such fear of the words extraterrestrial or unidentified flying object. It's been made for those who mention it to be looked upon as really stupid and a bit crazy as well. It's really the complex, the military complex military, well, whatever the word is, have really done a good job throughout the decades of keeping this the most important secret of mankind completely under wraps and completely compartmentalized in a fashion as well.
Exactly. They have done a really good job at intimidating professionals, whether they're in a university, whether they're in the government sector, or whether they're in the media or scientific laboratories. Any professional that gets involved in this topic is ridiculed and seriously faces rejection and loss of job and privileges, and it can be quite devastating professionally. And so if you've got a wife and family and you're dependent on a salary, you have to really be very highly committed to doing this work, which is why I think Dr. Steven Greer really is one of these true pioneering heroes. I mean, he, back in the early 90s, made this commitment. I mean, he was an emergency doctor at the time, right, and really decided that this was something that he was going to put his energies into, even though it would impact his career quite negatively, which over the years, obviously, it did.
Yes, absolutely. It's if people can get a chance to check him out and the documentaries he's done as well, then please do. Now, your work is really, really incredible. I think I was going through some of it today, your books, and I was like, this is fascinating stuff. Now, you do quite heavily go on to talk about the secret space program, which others have come on this show to discuss as well. Do you believe that when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin actually touched on touched down on the moon, that what we believe they saw is not actually what's been shown to us? It's not a barren wasteland. There are structures there. Yes,
that's what Armstrong and Aldrin saw, is something that has been a subject of a lot of rumours for many years, and people have heard about the missing 2 minutes. They've heard about various whistleblowers coming forward saying that there existed these ham radio intercepts of the real dialogue between Armstrong, Aldrin, and Houston, where basically they said that they had been met at the Sea of Tranquility crater, basically by a kind of fleet of extraterrestrial spacecraft. That there were these craft out there, which really is quite important in terms of understanding why it was that NASA never returned to the moon after the Apollo 17 mission. Very recently, one of the people that I've been working with who has had access to these secret space programs, back in 1969, he was actually working out of the Kennedy Space Center. He was working with one of the major NASA contractors, TRW, and he says that he was actually there when on the video monitors they saw what Aldrin and Armstrong were actually seeing, that there was actually a live video feed of what was going. So they did see this kind of ring of spacecraft lining the Sea of Tranquility crater, basically menacing the very small Apollo mission. And so this was someone who actually was there. He has documentation substantiating that he actually did work with NASA, that he actually was a part of the team that designed the Kennedy Space Center and was very close to the director of the Kennedy Space Center, Kurt DeBurse. So to me, this was really the kind of nail in the coffin in terms of, yes, this really did happen. Aldrin and Armstrong did see things on the moon that was covered up.
Yeah, because do we actually have any plans? Does NASA actually have any long-term ambitions to go back to the moon?
Well, actually, this is one of the things that was this whistleblower or this new secret space program witness has emphasized, that NASA actually did have quite an ambitious plan, that the Apollo missions, as we understand it, were part of a larger 4-stage mission that was really under the control of the Navy, the U.S. Navy. The first part was basically, as we saw, you have these Saturn V rockets delivering capsules or delivering astronauts to the moon to collect rocks and do scientific exploration. The second stage was to use these much larger rockets called the Nova rocket, which had a payload 10 times what the Saturn V rocket had, and this would have delivered men and equipment to the moon to build bases for the Navy. And the Navy plan was to basically, working through NASA, was to actually have 10,000 people permanently based on the moon. So this was the plan. Apollo was really just the first stage of this plan to actually have 10,000 people on the moon. And then from there, the third stage was basically to develop these fleets of craft, Nova rockets and other craft that would actually start to colonize other planets, other moons in our solar system, build bases on those. And then the fourth stage was to actually go outside of our solar system and establish a perimeter of solar systems, like the 10 or the 12 solar systems surrounding our solar system, and create a perimeter that would actually protect our solar system from any outside intruders. So NASA, the Apollo missions, was really the first stage of a 4-stage, very ambitious plan that was being controlled by the US Navy.
Very interesting, yeah. I mean, obviously they've got their eyes set to try to head towards Mars in the foreseeable future, but I wonder again what we'll find on Mars.
Well, that's a really interesting question, because the secret space program whistleblowers that I've been working with say that Mars was actually colonized well before any of the NASA missions out there to Mars. Like the Viking mission in 1971, I believe, was the first lander on Mars, and of course that's where you actually have pictures of Mars being transmitted back, and so that was really when most people kind of like associate planetary exploration of Mars. Is really beginning with Viking, with the lander and the lunar and the orbiter. But actually, according to these whistleblowers, the programs on Mars began much earlier. They can go back to the 1940s, which sounds incredible. That actually in that era, that Nazi Germany had made tremendous breakthroughs in the construction of secret space vehicles out of a base in Antarctica. So that simultaneously, while you had the war raging in Europe, at the same time you had the Nazis working with German secret societies in Antarctica, building these advanced spacecraft using a lot of esoteric knowledge that they had gained through psychic mediums and through very open-minded scientists, as well as collaboration with off-world civilizations. So it's really incredible material, but it kind of matches with what other whistleblowers have said, that actually a lot of the breakthroughs that occurred in Nazi Germany in terms of advanced aerospace projects, that ever since that time the United States and other countries have been feverishly trying to reverse engineer and catch up to what had been earlier created through the Nazis.
And when we say off-world meetings were taking place, or collaborations are taking place with the Nazis, I think your research has even gone in the direction that potentially it came from inner world, not off-world.
Well, this is one of the things. If you go back to the first literature that has emerged out of what the esoteric information that the Nazis were getting, they referred to the Vril Society, and that these psychic mediums had allegedly established contact with both extraterrestrial civilizations and inner world civilizations. So basically, you had both things going on. And looking at it now with hindsight, I think what happened was that there were different factions, and this is where it becomes very complicated, because it's not just one kind of race of extraterrestrials that are out there that are interacting with us, that there are multiple races out there that are interacting with us. Some of them had no problems in establishing relations with Adolf Hitler's Nazi regime. Even though we see it as egregious, the policies that the Nazis had, this group of extraterrestrials had no problems in establishing agreements with the Nazis, because their own mind view or their own kind of policies or mindset was very similar. And at the same time, there are other races that were horrified by what Hitler was doing. So we need to kind of really go beyond the idea that extraterrestrials that are monitoring our world are monolithic in attitude and activities, that they are as diverse and doing as many different things and as we are on the surface of the planet.
Yeah, and do you think some of these visitations that are taking place on Earth may be from even higher realms than some of these multiple what would you call it, multiple extraterrestrials that you're referring to? That actually some of these extraterrestrials, if you even could call them that, are actually from other dimensions, not even from the same space and time that some other visitors are coming from.
Well, that's a very important question. Exactly, what do we understand of the visitors? Are they kind of just coming from other worlds in the galaxy that we can observe through telescopes, or are there other dimensions? And according to multiple sources, that there actually are other dimensions, and that it all depends on the kind of frequency by which the matter vibrates, that determines what dimension these vehicles or these races come from, which helps explain why it is, for example, that many people who actually have UFO sightings, that these UFOs very often disappear, not so much by just kind of flying off into space, but just literally just disappear from sight, because they're able to increase their vibration by going into higher dimension, and so therefore they become invisible to us because our eyes are only able to capture a small part of the electromagnetic spectrum, the visual spectrum. But outside of the visual spectrum, everything continues to exist. It's just that we can't see it with our eyes. We need to have physical instrumentation to see it, and that's pretty much what we see happening with some of these extraterrestrial races, that they're able to kind of operate in these frequencies that are outside of our normal visual spectrum.
What do we know about the type of traffic going to Antarctic nowadays, and what secret missions or what secret bases may be based in Antarctica as we speak now?
Well, that's a very, very interesting question. I think what happened was that up until 1958, Antarctica was really a bastion for Nazis, German secret space programs that had been established there during the Second World War. And up until the late 1950s, Antarctica was really where their program was based. I think that what emerged was that in the 50s, because they had been so successful in establishing off-world bases on the moon, on Mars, and elsewhere in our solar system and beyond, that they no longer had a need for Antarctica. So they were able to leave Antarctica and basically through negotiations, in particular with the United States, really kind of like turn over a lot of their assets in Antarctica. So then in 1958, you had the Antarctic Treaty being signed. I think it was 58, 59, being signed by all the major nations. And essentially they said that Antarctica would no longer be a place where any kind of military base could be established. It would not be a place where nuclear weapons would be tested in any way, and Antarctica would in future be used for scientific exploration. And I think ever since that time, Antarctica has not been a place where you've had these kind of Nazi German secret space programs operating, and a lot of the kind of ancient technologies that are buried underneath the ice. This has been sought after by the United States, its allies, Britain, Australia, and so forth, and the Soviet Union and other nations.
Well, it does make you think, doesn't it, that what was there before the Great Ice Age, and was that part of Atlantis, maybe, that area?
I think so. There are maps. There are famous maps that Charles Hapgood popularized in his book, and two maps. Well, there's one map in particular that actually shows Antarctica being completely ice-free, and this was by Orontes Phineas, and that was during the 1500s that he had been able to develop this map based on ancient maps, which are very clearly based in the Vatican. That the Vatican has these maps, the ancient maps from the Library of Alexandria and so forth, and going all the way back to ancient Greece or Antarctica, Egypt, and all of these. A lot of that information is held secretly at the Vatican, and so Orontes Phineas, I believe, basically, who was a French cartographer, was able to get access to the Vatican Library and was able to discover that there was this southern continent that he was able to draw in his maps. And so that map of this southern continent, that now scientists or modern cartographers, and Charles Hapgood did this in his book concerning the ancient sea kings, he was able to basically identify the map as pointing to an ice-free Antarctica. So in the 1600s, there was a map of an ice-free Antarctica. And obviously that meant that at some point in our recent history, much, much more recently than what the scientists acknowledge, who say that the ice sheets over Antarctica are old as, several million years, that actually somewhere in a period, say maybe 10,000, 12,000 years ago, Antarctica was ice-free, and so that naturally raises the question, is this Atlantis that Plato talked about in his book, Critias? And I think that it's probably correct to say that Atlantis did exist, and that what we see today in Antarctica are basically the ice-covered remains of an ancient Atlantean civilization.
Yes, and what remnants of technology or, information, as Edgar Casey, foresaw that there was information still to be found on, from Atlantis that would hold keys to secret technology or secret understandings of ancient ways of doing things, that were far more advanced than we are now. So it does make you think. And again, if the Anunnaki did exist and we were enslaved in a sense, what have they left behind potentially?
Good questions. I think that there have been multiple extraterrestrial civilizations that over the years, and we're talking the course of many millennia, have interacted with humanity and altered our genetics. Now, that's not necessarily because they were trying to manipulate us. I think that some of the genetic alterations occurred were a result of these extraterrestrials wanting to assist human civilization in terms of its evolution. And also that would allow them to embed their star seeds in human society. In other words, if the human physical genetic makeup was altered slightly so that it included some of the genetics of these extraterrestrial races visiting us, that these extraterrestrials could incarnate or reincarnate into human bodies, because there would be a kind of compatibility, which is a very interesting thing. But I think it's very important to understand that genetics and the way in which genetics can be tweaked or altered in a way which makes it compatible with a soul matrix from a particular civilization is very important work, and I think in the future probably there'll be scientists that start to do that. But I think that is probably a part of why so many different extraterrestrial civilizations have been here and altering us, and the Anunnaki was just one amongst many. The Pleiadians, the Sirians, Andromedans, even reptilians, Greys, Talsetians. These are some of the civilizations that I discuss in the book Galactic Diplomacy, who have interacted with us.
Yes, absolutely. It was fascinating what you're saying. It really is. The idea that there's genetics in us which align to a particular type of soul lineage, in a sense. That is incredible. Well, it is. There's talk of the abductions being due to that there is some sort of connection with them, in a sense, and they abduct their own.
Well, that I think is an important thing to kind of like keep in mind, that the modern abduction phenomenon is really about one particular group, these kind of small grey extraterrestrials, who really are a very late addition to the game. Because genetic alteration has been going on for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years with humanity, and there are different racial subgroups all over the planet whose genetics are kind of more compatible with one particular ET group over another. So, for example, Northern Europeans, Scandinavians, their genetics are more compatible with groups from, say, the Pleiades, whereas those from the Indian subcontinent, their genetics are more compatible with groups from the Sirius star system. Then you have kind of Native Americans of the Americas. Their genetics are more compatible with groups from, like, say, Talseti. So you have this happening all around the world, and so now you have the Greys being involved in these abductions today, and they are trying to build yet another hybrid human species out of this tremendous variation of human extraterrestrial genetics that has been here on the planet for many hundreds of thousands of years. So the Greys are doing it today, and they're trying to like develop a particular human vehicle, if you like, comprising a particular set of genetics that their own people can incarnate, and that would allow their race to survive. In other words, the grey extraterrestrials whose physical bodies have deteriorated to a point where they realize that, within a few generations they will cease to exist as a species. They are trying to create a human grey hybrid that will be a suitable vehicle for the grey soul matrix to be able to incarnate.
Yeah, absolutely. And with so many different, as far as at a guess, types of species visiting this planet, if they wanted to destroy us, they could have done this many decades ago or centuries ago. So we're obviously very important to them, aren't we, in some respects? To them all.
Exactly, yes. I think when we look at the big picture, this has been going on for a long, long time, that human civilizations on the surface of the planet have been interfered with or have had their genetics altered, and they have been influenced at a political and social level by many different extraterrestrial races going back hundreds of thousands of years. That we also need to understand that during this whole period of time, that there are also these subterranean civilizations who are the remnants of very ancient civilizations from the surface of the planet. And we're saying, okay, like with Atlantis or Lemuria, we think of those as kind of like two ancient civilizations that kind of disappeared from the surface of the planet, and that it's possible that some of the survivors went underground to protect themselves from whatever surface cataclysms basically wiped their civilizations off the face of the earth. Well, apparently this has been going on for not hundreds of thousands but millions of years, and some of these subterranean civilizations have been here as much as 18 million years, which is an astounding number, and that these civilizations know Earth's history, Earth's true history, in terms of how we began, how we were seeded here many millions of years ago, how very recently there have been different extraterrestrial visitors that have come in and kind of blended their genetics with our genetics. So it's a really complex phenomenon. And just today, actually, I released on my website a video explaining what I call the 3D chessboard of global exopolitics. That we need to look at global politics not just from a very traditional perspective of kind of mapping out the different actors and institutions and processes involving politics at a global level. We also need to look at, what are these ancient civilizations that are underneath the Earth's surface doing, how are they interacting with humanity, and what are the extraterrestrials doing? We need to have almost expand our understanding of global politics from this kind of two-dimensional chessboard into a three-dimensional chessboard.
Well,
so that video is on my website now for anyone.
Sure, and your website is?
Exopolitics.org, exopolitics.org.
Okay, well that's coming up on the screen. It has been coming up on the screen and will continue to as well. How are they leaving the inner Earth? Where are they coming in and out? How are they doing that as well without no one seeing them?
I think that they have technologies that are able to kind of shift their kind of frequency of their vehicles and of their bodies into these higher dimensionals, so that they can literally pass through rock walls or fly through the kind of rocky exterior of the Earth's crust. so that that they have what is described as kind of like a honeycomb Earth from which they operate out of, so that beneath the Earth's surface, well before you get to the molten core, there's this kind of honeycomb exterior beneath our immediate surface that extends hundreds of miles below the surface, and that's a honeycomb. And that honeycomb has pockets that are huge. Some of those pockets are as big as like the state of Texas in the United States, or as big as continental Europe. That's how big some of these are. And these honeycomb caverns have, in some cases, kind of like tunnels going all the way to the surface or close to the surface. And then once you're, sufficiently close, then there can be some kind of phase shifting technology that comes into play, and then that they can kind of like break through the remaining kind of rock interface, so that their vehicles and people can travel back and forth between the inner Earth and the surface of the planet.
Fascinating. I mean, if you look at the amount of people that go missing per year in the US and other countries that are never found again, it's... And we're not talking about murder cases here, we're just talking about, the missing. It almost makes you think, well, is there something else at play here?
Oh, well, that's a critical question, really is. Because when you look at the history of humanity and all of these different ET races that have come here, basically interbreeding with us and blending their genetics with ours, that means that, we really are an amalgam of many different extraterrestrial races. And because of that amalgam, we have the capacity to really not only embody different extraterrestrial races, but also be vehicles or suitable ways or people or beings to be able to kind of like channel or create frequencies and vibrations that are unique to each of these different races. So that means that we are potentially incredible creators. And this is something that I've found to be very interesting, that has come forth from the material that Goode has released, that he says that up to 900 different extraterrestrial civilizations now trade with these human colonies on Mars, and that humanity has established a reputation throughout the galaxy as being great creators, scientific engineers, and so we are able to build things. And I think it kind of makes sense because of this kind of unique genetic blend that we have. So why do so many people go missing? I think it's because we are a valuable commodity genetically, and one of the things that we are very good at producing on Earth, and it's very sad to say this, but it's the truth, we are very good at producing surplus population. We have a population bomb in the world. Probably in Europe and the United States, we have kind of population growth has kind of leveled off, but it's growing very rapidly in Asia, in the Americas, and Africa, and other places. So we have surplus population that rulers or people that are involved in these secret space programs can basically make trades. They can make deals and say, okay, we want so many human captives that we want to use as trade with this particular ET group or that particular ET group. So, there really is a flourishing slave trade that's very galactic in scope, and it's very disturbing, but I think this is one of the more disturbing aspects of the secret space program material.
That is very disturbing. Yeah, that is. Well, where is the secret space program now, would you say? Is it still very active? Is that where your research has taken you, that it's still active now?
It's become very, very active. As I mentioned earlier, the Germans set up a program in Antarctica, and that became very active in the 40s and 50s. In the United States, they basically played catch up with what the Germans were doing, and after a period of kind of just developing, a very difficult period of developing functional anti-gravity spacecraft in the 60s and in the 70s, in the 1980s, the US Navy was able to finally deploy its first space battle groups. And they deployed 4 of them in the 80s, and in total there are now 8 space battle groups. And we need to think of this as very analogous to the way in which the United States has divvied up the world. The Navy has these battle groups, led by an aircraft carrier with support ships stationed all over the world, and that's how the US Navy basically projects its power around the globe. So similarly, the Solar Warden program, which was created through the United States Navy, which has a long history of developing these battle groups that can be deployed for months on end anywhere around the world, that the Navy developed these battle groups and deployed them throughout our solar system. So the Navy, through the Solar Warden program, has projected itself around our solar system and also in nearby solar systems. And that there's also another space program which is run by corporations, which has over the years become even more advanced than what the Navy was able to achieve through Solar Warden. And this other program, it's referred to as the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate, and its main base of activities is Mars. And that's where I mentioned that they trade with up to 900 different extraterrestrial civilizations.
What do you think of, obviously you've mentioned this a little bit before, in the sense that the Nazis had, what were using psychics to really communicate with a lot of these races. What do you think of the state of channelers out there nowadays connecting with various different races? The messages they're bringing through seems to be of love and light and support for us, and I think some do channel through sometimes negative, maybe one or two, maybe a bit of a negative message in a sense, but mainly it's a very positive message that we are not alone, and we are they seeded us, and that they are connecting with these certain people that are able to channel them.
Well, channeling in my mind is a science, and it requires really a lot of discernment, and there are some people who have done really amazing channeling work, which is even today is very respected. You mentioned Edgar Cayce. And another source is the Ra material. That was established through the work of channels. Carla Ruckert, and Don Elkins was a professor of applied physics, and he set up a very rigorous kind of methodology for that kind of channeling. And I think even today you have some really high quality channels and also low quality channels. And the high quality channels are very discerning. They know that there can be corruption, there can be a lot of noise, and so high quality channels, in my mind, they're distinctive because they're able to kind of filter out the noise and get to the real material, whereas kind of many other channels who are beginning, they have information coming into their head, but unless they've had a lot of experience in sorting out who this is, it's like they are not able to kind of like determine how good that information is. So, channeling can be both a source of really accurate information about what's happening out there. I think the Germans were able to do this. Casey was able to do this. The Ra material was able to do this, and many others have been able to do this.
Yes.
But at the same time, there are others who are really kind of like unconsciously conduits for disinformation. And there's a famous case of a channeler here in the United States, Greg Giles, who basically acknowledged that this had happened to him, that he thought he was channeling the Confederation of Planets, but in the end realized that he was actually being used by a military group that had tricked him.
Well, there's also remote viewing as well. Now, remote viewers have channeled into, have remote viewed ETs before, and some of the good ones will say that they're always, pushed away once they are there. If they're not supposed to be there, and these ETs do not want them there, remote viewing, they are moved out.
Exactly. Remote viewing is also a way in which some of this information can be accessed. I think there were some really good remote viewers. Ingo Swann was one of the best. There's another one, Courtney Brown, who I think has done some really good work. And Joseph McMonigal is another one. So there are a number of remote viewers who have applied protocols, and with the remote viewing, which is based often on a kind of military set of protocols, it tends to be much more scientific and much more focused on it, getting an accurate description of a piece of the puzzle. So, as I said, Ingo Swann was good at this. Courtney Brown is doing this today. He's coming forward with some really interesting information about what is happening out there with the different ET races.
I'll check him out, definitely. And there's also Bashir as well. Daryl Atkins, I think it may be, but he channels Bashir, and Bashir only seems to bring through very loving spiritual teaching information in a sense. But then, look at some of these cases maybe where people have, like, as you say, have thought they were channeling such and such, and really they generally may have channeled, but then again, could that entity that's come through them have been masquerading as something else? Like, for example, if these inner Earth species do exist, as you say they do, and it's very possible that they do, have they been tricking us maybe? Has others been tricking us, saying they're from Pleiades when they're not, or saying they're on this mission when they're not, just to, whatever the reason is that they're using a particular person to cause such discernment in a sense?
Well, yes, that's exactly what Corey Goode has said has been happening with these inner Earth civilizations, that they have been interacting with humanity for a long time, and more recently, over the last 70 years, we have developed very destructive technologies, atomic weapons and thermonuclear weapons, which could be used against these inner Earth civilizations if we knew where they were. And so I think that some of the channeling that has been occurring, that has been done in association with these inner Earth beings, that they have really protected themselves by pretending to be from these off-world places, the Pleiades and so forth, so that way anyone listening in or anyone monitoring these channeling communications is going to be fooled into thinking that that these beings exist off planet and that they're trying to help the humanity raise in consciousness and become aware of what's really going on. Because this is one of the things that they do, that they release information that educates us about what's going on. So if it's discovered, for example, by the cabal, the secret government that wants to maintain secrecy, there's actually been a particular group of inner Earth civilizations that have been revealing what's been going on, and they realize that, then yes, they would use some of these destructive weapons on them. So yes, there's I think justifiable reasons for why these inner Earth civilizations are doing what they're doing.
Yes, absolutely. God, this is interesting. Yeah. Okay. I just had another question there. It's completely left my mind a little bit, but it'll come back to me. It will. Do you think there's for most of these species there's a sort of spiritual sense to them, or there's some sort of overriding law in a sense between them of trying to bring us to a space where we're able to accept them, or we're able to have that interaction with them? Are they waiting for us to ascend to a certain spiritual level? I suppose that's what I'm trying to say.
I think this kind of spiritual element is a very important thing that we need to understand about what is happening with us as a species at the moment. That there are some groups, some extraterrestrials, that view us as really going through a process of transformation. That we're kind of like we're the proverbial kind of caterpillar in the cocoon that's about to burst into this incredible butterfly, and they kind of see us in that way, and so they're trying to help us, feeding us spiritual information about the nature of the universe, the nature of these high dimensional realms, trying to kind of like help us go through this very difficult birthing process so that we emerge at the other end as fully conscious manifestors of reality. That these spiritual philosophies that they have been disseminating for decades now essentially boil down to the idea that we have the power to consciously manifest our own reality, and that when we work as a collective, that there is no stopping us. And we kind of see evidence of that again and again when you get large numbers of people coming together, embracing a particular cause that they literally change society, and that can change the world. We've seen many examples of that over the centuries. Like the anti-slavery movement, or the kind of female
Anti-gay,
emancipation. Exactly. So yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, no, because I'm sure you use the word in your book, the law of one. As in that, and I might be misinterpreting this, but as in the sense that we are all one, and that's where they maybe come from. In that sense, that this oneness aspect, that we're all family.
That's right. Yes, that the law of one basically puts forward this philosophy, this spiritual philosophy, where everyone around us has made a decision to either consciously act either towards service to self or service to other, and that as we evolve, we basically go through different phases of these spiritual journeys of either a service to self or a service to other, but that eventually these two distinct pathways, and in the law of one they say that in the sixth density, those beings who follow a service to self life philosophy versus those who follow the service to other life philosophy, that in the sixth density that they merge, that there's a coming together, but we are now in like this third, morphing into a fourth density state of consciousness, and so for us these two paths appear to be very, very different, and of course duality thinking is very prevalent in our world, and we have a lot of conflicts. But that as you get higher and higher in these densities, these unique paths actually blend and become one expression of the law of one, or of the creator of all that is.
Yeah.
So there is a very profound spiritual philosophy that has been released through the books, the raw material.
Yes. Well, I always think to myself, right? Well, if these species, these extraterrestrials, multiple of them as well, are just 1,000 years ahead of us, in a sense. What would 1,000 years more, in our sense of our religious structures, look like from now, 1,000 years' time? Would they be more evolved in different ways of thinking? And that's where they've got to. These other species have already got to that point where it's not about religion, it's about the consciousness. That's what it's really about, that we all are this consciousness, then we all go back to a place we came from. It consciousness wasn't born in the womb. There was a pre-life. There's multiple lives we have, and that it's not about the money. It's not about control. It's really about the soul's experience to grow, to ascend, maybe that there's multiple infinite levels that the soul can go to. All this understanding that we don't have right now, where they do, and maybe they're helping us to evolve to spiritually as well. So it's very interesting to hear what you've got to say.
Oh yes, they're definitely helping us evolve. There are groups that are doing precisely that, and then on the other hand, there are other groups that are basically trying to kind of take us down a particular path of service to self.
Right. Now, David Icke talks about the lizards, in a sense, the shape-shifting lizards, where there was a race that did not have our best intentions at heart at all. This race, or this, maybe it's not even lizards, maybe, it's something maybe even higher than that, some sort of consciousness that's not seen with the naked eye, in a sense, that's around us, that's had control of this planet for a long time, or control of those in power, shall we say. And it's this consciousness, whatever it is, has taken us down the path that we're on now, in a sense. Yet it's nothing that we can't combat, or as we evolve, it has less of a pull on us. But I do understand what you're saying. What do you think about David Icke's work, or have you ever looked at that?
Oh yes, I've looked quite a bit at David Icke's work. I think he's got some important parts of the puzzle that he's been putting out. I think that there definitely is a very heavy involvement of reptilians in human history, in particular, in terms of how they have affiliated themselves in the 1940s with Nazi Germany and with the establishment of their space program, and ever since behind the scenes in setting up a secret Fourth Reich, where basically these reptilians have been trying to get humanity to provide the kind of resources, the personnel, and the kind of materials, so that we can be an ally to these reptilians in essentially interplanetary conquest or interstellar conquest. So I think that they really have the idea of using humanity as mercenaries, and we have been used as mercenaries for the reptilians. And I think that this is important to understand, that the reptilians do this because they realize that we are largely a sleeping civilization, that we operate largely out of our unconscious, and consciously we are not aware of everything that is going on. So we're very easy for them to manipulate, to be these mercenaries for their kind of interstellar conquest plans. But as we wake up, as we raise in consciousness, which is what the positive ETs are doing, raising our consciousness, so that way we can realize what's going on, and then we can understand, oh, okay, that's how the reptilians are being manipulating us. Well, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to put an end to that. And I think that's what we are seeing now. In the next few years, as more and more people awaken, the kind of material that David has been putting out for 20 years now is no longer going to be dismissed out of hand as ridiculous.
No.
It's going to be like, oh, okay, that's how they did it.
Yeah.
And people will awaken and realize that this is how they manipulated us, but it's not going to happen anymore. We're awake now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is not just an American secret, a Russian secret, or an Indian secret, or a China. This is a world government cover-up, would you say?
Definitely. It is something that from the beginning required all the major powers coordinating. First you had the Germans doing what they were doing, and the Germans had their allies, and they went off and did what they did. And then you had the victorious powers that realized what had happened, that the Germans hadn't been defeated, that a powerful faction had gone down to Antarctica, and that after an initial attempt to negotiate with them had failed, then there was a naval expedition, the Admiral Byrd high jump expedition, and that failed. And so then there were basically agreements that were reached with these German redoubts in Antarctica, and then all the major nations collaborate in how to deal with this. So there has been a worldwide collaboration, and these secret societies that were behind the Germans, that were kind of had a Nazi outlook, they have global affiliations, and so they have now established themselves very securely in all the major power centers of the planet. To in some cases more, they have more influence than others. So they have a lot of influence in the United States and major European nations, Britain as well, has not as much power over Russia, not as much power over China, certainly a lot of power over Japan and so forth.
So, Michael, is disclosure is disclosure ever going to happen, and also is contact ever going to happen on a global scale?
Well, disclosure is happening now. What we have is public disclosure. The information is being released by whistleblowers, leaked documents. The information that we now have in terms of the big picture of what is going on is really amazing, really remarkable compared to like what we knew, say, 15 years ago when Steven Greer started his disclosure project. We just have so much more information because of all of these whistleblowers and leaked documents that have emerged into the public arena. So public disclosure has been happening. What we have not seen yet, official disclosure, but I think what is inevitably going to occur is that when we have a critical mass of the public suddenly accepting all of this information, suddenly realizing that, you know, what people like Steven Greer have been saying, what David Icke has been saying, what you've been putting radio show, that is real and that they now want to support that and they get prepared to mobilize, then we're going to have official disclosure. But until then, I think the amount of information that is coming out gives me a lot of confidence that official disclosure is inevitable, because the public are just going to mobilize like anything once they realize just how true this information is.
Okay. And what would you say is your most important message to the audience?
Just absorb the material that is out there. Just try to feel how true it is, and the stuff that resonates with you as being true, tell others. Speak to as many people as you can about those things that resonate as true, because when you speak to them, your words will carry that resonant energy that you feel about the truth of this. And even though at first they might be resistant, they might ridicule you, the fact that you're sincere and truly believe this will impact them at a certain level. And depending on how open they are, how receptive they are to this kind of information, they'll go through their own journey. And as this kind of continues throughout the public arena, then you're going to have more and more people awakening. And that's really how we're going to have this kind of full disclosure. It'll be a public disclosure process, and then eventually the official disclosure will happen. But official disclosure will never tell us nearly as much as we can feel or know to be true based on what we have been reading and observing from these whistleblowers and witnesses and contactees.
Well, Dr. Michael Salia, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. It really has been so fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.